Welcome to LFC Transfer Room. Today we're going to do a player versus player comparison. Everyone's been hating on Jordan Henderson recently, so why not look at our most hated player in our social media versus their most hated player in social media. So today is going to be Henderson versus Mctominay. Who's the better central midfielder? Who's the better player? Who's the one you would want in your side? So we're going to look at usual 5 main statistics to work out who's going to win this player versus player battle. We're going to look at shooting, we're going to look at passing, we're going to look at goal creation, we're going to look at defence, and we're going to look at team play. So the first category to look at for these players is shooting. And I've got to tell you, it's terrible for both. Their expected goals is 0.10 and 0.12. That means 1 in every 10 games you might expect one of them to get a goal. Their shot percentage on target, so the percentage shots, is around about 22%, and neither of them have a high XG when you'd expect them to score a goal. It's 0.06, 0.07. The shooting distance, 22 yards, 19 yards. There is absolutely nothing to separate these two when it comes to shooting, and I can tell you now point blank, you do not want a single one of them taking a shot on goal. So when it comes to shooting, I'm calling it a draw, I'm calling it pathetic, I'm calling it keep them as far away from goal as possible. Now the next one we need to look at is we need to look at passing, and this is where it gets actually quite interesting when you compare the two, and this is probably where Jordan Henderson is probably underrated a little bit from Liverpool fans when you start to look at the data. So if you look at completed passes, Jordan Henderson's average is 70 per game, with Scott McTominay around about 40. Both have around about the same completion percentage. But where it gets really interesting is short passes, medium passes and long passes. So Henderson does around about 16 long passes per game to Scott McTominay's 8. And there's a slight difference in the completion percentage, but it's very close. Short passes is again very similar, and the completion percentage is very similar. But the distance is huge. 1,400 metres per average for Henderson, 800 metres for Scott McTominay. With a progressive distance over 100 metres, a full pitch length per game, you would expect more from Jordan Henderson. Now, interestingly, only 200 metres progressive distance is the same for every single United player. Every single one is within the 200 metres. Fred, Bruno Fernandes, even the new signing Casemiro, no one can seem to get them moving up the pitch, whereas Henderson does that quite well. And this seems to be probably one of their main problems. So they're passing very much sideways, but they're not progressing up the pitch, with Jordan Henderson having over 100 metres progression on every single United player. So when it comes to passing, pass types, crosses, switches of play, low, medium, high, all of which Henderson has a better completion of. Where it gets interesting is taking passes under pressure. In the bottom half of the pitch, all United players take more passes under pressure in the final third of the pitch, whereas Henderson takes them in the medium and higher thirds of the pitch, which tells you that they're putting themselves under pressure and they don't have someone that can pass that progression out of the final third to switch defence from attack. But when it comes down to passing, it's pretty easy dub for Jordan Henderson against Scott McTominay. I mean, he outranks every single United player for this, including the new signing Casemiro and his stats from Real Madrid. The next one we need to look at is goal and shot creation. Now, Jordan Henderson theoretically plays at a number 8 for Liverpool, so he should be doing this better, and it's pretty evident when you look at it. Shot creating actions per game, Jordan Henderson does 2. Scott McTominay does 1.44. Goal creating actions, one in every 4 games for Henderson, 1 in every 10 games for Scott McTominay. Scott McTominay just doesn't seem to be effective in the final third of the pitch. So when you talk about goal creation, when you talk about creating opportunities, he's just not that guy. He's not that guy. He's not who you'd rely on. What's really interesting is Bruno Fernandes is pretty much double Jordan Henderson for a lot of these stats, but goal creating actions per 90 minutes, is Bruno Fernandes is only double what Jordan Henderson is with a 0.5, so one every other game is a goal-creating action, which is quite low, I thought. But once again, Casemiro below Jordan Henderson when it comes to this stat. So I think what we're starting to see is Jordan Henderson is a playmaking defensive midfielder. Yes, he can out-create opportunities for Scott McTominay, but 0.25, not really that good. So if he is a defensive midfielder, he should be very good in defence. And let's look at their defensive stats. And again, once again, this is really interesting. So tackles won, around about 2 per game for both player, with 1.42 tackles won for Henderson to 1.31 for Scott McTominay. But tackles in the final third, Scott McTominay does 1 a game, Jordan Henderson does 1 every other game, so 0.57. Midfield third, Henderson's ahead, and attacking third, midfield, Henderson's ahead. So again, what you're seeing here is Scott McTominay does most of his work in the defensive third. This is where United seem to get stuck. You look at blocks, McTominay has more blocks. When you look at number of times blocking shots standing in the path, around about 1 every other game. But when you take into account tackles and interceptions, Jordan Henderson is completing more tackles and interceptions, but he's also doing it higher up the pitch. This is something where really Scott McTominay seems to be doing well at, but he's not. I don't think he's able to put the pressure higher up the pitch. What's really interesting and good news for the United fans is Casemiro does 4.75 tackles and interceptions per game, which is nearly 1.5 per game more than Henderson, and definitely more than Scott McTominay. One of the really interesting stats is when you look at pressures. So once again, all Scott McTominay's pressures, so when he's putting a press on, is all in the final third. Around about 5 in the final third per game, 7 in the midfield third, and 2 in the final third. Compare that to Henderson's 4 pressures in the defensive third per game, 10 in the midfield third, so 9.75, and then 3 in the attacking third. So again, you can see that they're actually attacking in different areas. But one really side stat is Fred does 26 pressures per game and only manages to complete 7. He seems to run around like a headless chicken when I was comparing all the United midfielders. But when it comes to defence, unfortunately, Henderson is once again successful for United fans. He seems to be making more of an impact. Now the final one is the captain's one. You know, a lot of people talk about Henderson's the captain. It's about what he brings to the team. It's how he leads the team. It's that team success. It's what sort of difference does he make on the pitch when he's on the pitch. So team success, goals plus or minus when Henderson is on the pitch, Liverpool are positive 1.06. Now interesting, Scott McTominay is also a positive when he's on the pitch for Manchester United at a 0.39. So he does make a positive difference to this team. And their points per match when Scott McTominay is on the pitch is 1.79. Compared to Jordan Henderson's 2.14, which is slightly lower, but it's actually quite a positive impact on the team. So the plus and minus on the team success is positive 0.96 for Henderson, positive 2.6 for Scott McTominay. Now, what's really good news for United fans is Casemiro's XG is a positive 0.79 when he's on the pitch, which for a Real Madrid team is obviously very good. You would anticipate that that's going to be even better for a Manchester United team where he's leading the midfield. He has comparable stats to Jordan Henderson when it comes to team leadership and success. So maybe Casemiro may be the difference, but when it comes to Scott McTominay, Fred and Bruno Fernandes, Jordan Henderson beats them hands down. So when it comes to team success, maybe that is where the captain comes. And it comes down to the winner. I mean, this is a Scott McTominay versus Henderson, the two hated players in both teams. And I think whilst Henderson wins this really clearly, one thing it seems to me quite apparent, Scott McTominay is not a defensive midfielder. Scott McTominay should be a centre-back. He wins on average defensive headers the same as a centre-back. Defensive tackle duels the same as a centre-back. Successful pressures are all in the final third, like a centre-back. He would be actually a relatively decent defensive centre-back. Whereas Henderson needs to move out of that 8 position for Liverpool and move into a 6 position where he's distributing play and controlling it via possession, because that is where he is being most successful. This has been LSC Transfer Room. This has been Player vs Player. Jordan Henderson takes this one, but there's some interesting things going on for United, with Casemiro potentially making a positive difference, but even Henderson would take him down on a Player vs Player. So make sure you check into the next one, because maybe we'll do a Casemiro versus Henderson